Hey there, this is Alexis Knight. Welcome to True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. I'm your host, guiding you through cases that have moved through the courts and reached a conclusion. They've left the public divided. These are not your typical cut and dried cases, guys. These are the ones where the facts may be clear, but the truth, well, that's another story. Now, imagine this. You're living in the 1990s, a decade marked by cultural shifts and emerging technology, when suddenly the news breaks about a young woman who has disappeared under suspicious circumstances. As the investigation unfolds, it reveals a chilling connection to a seemingly ordinary couple, Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo. What folds is a harrowing tale of manipulation, violence, and betrayal that leaves a nation reeling. Here in this episode, we're going to dive into the deeply controversial case of Karla, who was implicated in the horrific rape and murder of several young women alongside her then-husband. And they were known as the Ken and Barbie killers, if you've heard of this story. But we're going to particularly home in on Karla, because here we're looking at public opinion and how she was perceived in court and in the public. Now, initially, she was perceived as a victim of her husband Paul's influence. Her eventual role in these heinous crimes raised questions eventually that continue still today to divide public opinion. After pleading guilty to manslaughter, Karla served just 12 years in prison, leading many to wonder, was justice truly served? Or did she escape accountability for her actions? Join me now as we explore the complex layers of this case, examining the details that shocked the nation and the ongoing debate about Karla's mental state and culpability in these horrific crimes. Now, Karla's case is one of the most chilling examples of crime in Canada, intertwining elements of manipulation, violence, and moral ambiguity. At the center of this story is a woman who, alongside her then-husband Paul, was implicated in the horrific rape and murder of several young women during the 1990s. While the public's initial perception painted Karla as a victim of her husband's influence, further examination reveals a much more complex and disturbing picture. When Karla and Paul were arrested, the media was quick to label them as a power couple in crime. And this sensationalism contributed to a narrative that initially depicted Karla as a submissive partner, coerced into her actions by her dominant husband. This portrayal raises critical questions about the nature of complicity in crimes of this magnitude. Was Karla truly a victim? Or was she an equal participant in the horrific acts committed against these young women? As the trial progressed, the prosecution presented evidence that painted a very different story. Karla's involvement in the crimes was more than just passive acquiescence. She actively participated in the horrific acts, raising doubts about her claims of victimhood. This discrepancy between perception and reality prompted widespread debate about her culpability. Many people struggled to reconcile the image of this young woman, often seen as charming and innocent, with the gruesome nature of the crimes she was accused of. And if you see them, you see the Ken and Barbie reference. And if you don't know them, just picture that, and it would be hard to picture Ken and Barbie committing heinous crimes. The legal outcomes of Karla's case further fueled public outrage. Pleading guilty to manslaughter, she served only 12 years in prison, a sentence that many deemed insufficient given the gravity of the crimes. The light sentence raised alarms about the justice system's treatment of women who commit violent acts, sparking discussions about the inherent biases that often accompany cases involving female offenders. Critics argue that the legal system failed to hold Karla fully accountable for her actions, perpetuating the notion that women, especially those perceived as victims, could evade the full consequences of their crimes. The polarizing nature of public opinion surrounding Karla Homolka highlights the complexities of defining justice in such a controversial case. While some view her as a calculating accomplice who should face harsher repercussions, others argue that she was a manipulated individual caught in the grip of a manipulation and violent partner. This division prompts deeper questions about how we assess responsibility in cases where manipulation and fear and personal choice intertwine. As we navigate these moral quandaries, it's essential to confront our biases and assumptions. How do we judge individuals like Karla, who occupy a gray area between victim and perpetrator? Is it possible to separate her actions from the influence of her partner? These questions will guide our exploration of this narrative, urging us to consider the broader implications of this case. And like in a lot of high-profile cases, most high-profile cases, if not all, the media's role was big. From the moment the details of the crimes began to unfold, the press was relentless in its coverage, often sensationalizing every aspect of the story. The labels and the descriptions used by various outlets significantly influenced public perception, turning Karla into both a symbol of horror and a subject of intrigue. The moniker Ken and Barbie killers encapsulated this duality, reducing the complex realities of their actions to a catchy phrase that obscured the horrific nature of the crimes. Seeing Ken and Barbie killers in the media, of course, that drew everyone in, and of course it would. This sensationalism raised significant ethical questions, though, about media responsibility in reporting such cases. Does anyone out there think that the media's role at times could be seen as obstructing? Not sure, but their role seems to have something to do with all of these cases in shaping public opinion. Are we glad about that? Are we not glad about that? In their quest for ratings and engagement, media outlets often prioritize sensational details over the facts and accuracy and comprehensive understanding in cases like this. And as a result, when they do this, the narrative can shift from an exploration of facts to make an intelligent choice, turns it into a spectacle focused on shock value. So people are shocked and interested. It does not mean they know anything more about the case, even though they're out there making all their judgments. This transformation can diminish the gravity of the crimes in the public's eye and lead to a public that is misinformed about the realities of the situation. And this can lead to problems. Karla's case specifically sparked debates about how women are portrayed in the media, particularly in the context of violent crimes. The public's fascination with her persona often overshadowed the brutality of her actions in these crimes. The public was fascinated with her, and this often overshadowed the brutality of what she had done. Many narratives painted her as a victim of her husband's influence, allowing the public to sympathize with her rather than hold her accountable for her role in the murders. This sympathy, in turn, sparked backlash from those who believed it undermined the severity of the crimes committed and the suffering of the victims and their families. Additionally, the media's framing of Karla as a victim led to polarized public opinion regarding her mental state and culpability. Some viewed her as a woman under duress, manipulated into participating in heinous acts because she was influenced by a powerful male figure, while others contended that she actively chose to engage in these actions, suggesting that her seemingly submissive demeanor masked a more calculating persona. This debate over her mental state reveals how challenging human behavior can be to figure out and the difficulty of categorizing individuals in black and white terms. I say it often in these podcasts, I don't think anything psychological can be black and white. Too many things contribute. Now, as we examine the public discourse surrounding Karla here, it becomes evident that the case challenges our own understanding of morality and justice. And the contrast between public sympathy for her alleged victimhood and then the full-on outrage for her criminal actions by others reflect the broader struggles society faces in figuring out any of this. Where are the lines? How do we balance the complexities of an individual's circumstance and mental state with the demand for justice? Ultimately, the media's portrayal of Karla serves as a microcosm of society's ongoing struggle to navigate the narratives of crime and punishment and personal accountability. It compels us to reflect on our perceptions and biases, urging us to seek a deeper understanding of the factors that influence behavior in extreme situations. To understand why someone commits crimes and understand more about the mind, we could help stop some of these crimes before they happen. As we continue to unpack this case, it's essential to keep in mind the power of narrative and the responsibility that comes with shaping public opinion. It's a lot of power when you can control the opinion of the public through media. Now, the implications of Karla's case extend far beyond the courtroom verdicts, as do all cases we talk about here. They resonate deeply within discussions of morality and justice and human behavior. The polarized public perception surrounding Karla's involvement in the crimes poses significant questions about how society views female perpetrators, especially when they're intertwined with powerful male figures. And let's take a look at what they actually were doing. Karla and her then-husband Paul were involved in the brutal rapes and murders of several young women in the 90s. Their crimes included the abduction of 15-year-old Leslie Mahaffey and 14-year-old Kristen French, both of whom were lured to their home. And once there, the victims were drugged, sexually assaulted, and tortured. Karla and Paul filmed some of these horrific acts, showcasing their disturbing enjoyment of the violence. The couple murdered Leslie after several hours of abuse. They dismembered her body. They disposed of the remains in a nearby lake. Kristen was similarly abducted, subjected to violent assaults, and ultimately killed. The shocking nature of these crimes, coupled with the chilling premeditation involved, so it sparked national outrage and is what left a lasting impact on public perception of both Karla and Paul. But today we're looking at Karla. And now that first I introduced them as the Ken and Barbie killers, you might have thought of one thing. Now I just described this crime, these crimes, you might be thinking about something else. Hence, how media and their portrayal of Ken and Barbie can miss some of these heinous details, and therefore that affects public opinion very much. As for Karla here, Karla's plea deal and subsequent sentence of 12 years sparked widespread outrage, particularly among the families of the victims. Many felt that the justice system failed to adequately address the severity of her actions, viewing her light sentence as a reflection of gender biases that often downplay women's culpability in violent crimes. The contrasting treatment of male and female offenders in the legal system has long been a topic of debate, and Karla's case brought this issue to the forefront once again. The discussions surrounding her role in the murders reveal broader attitudes in society toward women who commit these kinds of crimes. While male perpetrators often face harsher judgment and stricter sentences, female offenders can sometimes be viewed through a lens of sympathy. perceived more as victims of circumstance rather than active participants in their crime. This phenomenon raises questions about the underlying biases that influence public perception and legal outcomes. Furthermore, the narrative around Karla has evolved over the years, with many expressing conflicting feelings about her post-prison life. So after her release, she attempted to reintegrate into society, but her presence remained contentious. Public sightings and subsequent media coverage reignited the debates about her culpability and the justice system's response to her crimes. Many individuals they fight with the moral implications of her actions and the notion of rehabilitation. Can someone who's committed such egregious acts truly reintegrate into society? How do they get that out of their brains? Or should they forever be marked by their past? They did it, they are now this way, and that's it. The challenges of Karla's case, they're challenges for us. We have to confront uncomfortable truths about accountability, redemption, and the human capacity for change. No situation looks the same, and therefore these blanketed laws and rules, it's hard to determine. And that's what we're seeing in the public perception. When it's not cut and dried, there still are issues. And a lot of these cases are not cut and dried, hence the public opinion. And now for this case, it left a lasting impact on discussions surrounding victim advocacy and the importance of addressing the needs of those affected by violent crime. The voices of the victims and their families, they often get drowned out by all the sensationalism and the things the public is interested in. And this reality emphasizes the need to remember and honor those who actually suffered in these crimes, redirecting the focus from the perpetrators to the lives lost and the pain endured by the families left behind. And you're not thinking of that too much when you hear Ken and Barbie killers. You just might not be thinking about that. But then, as the trial progressed, the media's portrayal began to shift, with an increasing focus on Karla's character and her perceived culpability. Reports began to question her role in the crimes, exploring whether she was a willing participant or merely a victim of her husband's manipulation. This shift in narrative also played a significant role in polarizing public opinion. Whether the public was aware or not, they went right from Ken and Barbie to, hey, there's some crimes here. The relentless media coverage all the time also influenced the public's understanding of legal proceedings. The way in which the media portrayed Karla's plea deal and subsequent sentencing, it led to more outrage because many felt that her 12-year sentence was insufficient given the gravity of the crimes. The perception that she received preferential treatment because of her gender further fueled anger and debate, highlighting the complexities surrounding gender dynamics in the justice system. And again, where are the victims? As we reflect on the role of media in Karla's story, it becomes clear that the public perception is often shaped by the narratives constructed by those who report on these events. What responsibility do they have to give you the right information? You are taking the time to watch the news after all. What is the definition of news, and did you get it? The difficulties of this case, the challenges, reveal the profound impact that media has and can frame public opinion. They can help frame the public's understanding of guilt and accountability and justice. In society where sensationalism often triumphs over depth and facts, the challenges of navigating the truth become increasingly complicated. So while you have trials where the public is glued to their television or podcast, you think you're getting all this great information, you really need to check. Are you? Or does it just sound like something you want to listen to? Either way, in this case, the media's stance did change. As the details of Karla's involvement in the crimes surfaced, this case sparked intense discussions about female perpetrators and the difficult dynamics of abusive relationships. The public's reaction to Karla's actions alongside the narrative of her being under Paul's influence reveals the struggle that the public has to reconcile traditional views of victimhood with the very harsh realities of Karla's criminal behavior. One significant aspect of the public discourse surrounding Karla's case is the examination of gender dynamics in the legal system. Many people felt that her light sentence of 12 years for her role reflected a societal bias that downplays women's culpability in violent crimes. The narrative that framed Karla as a victim raised concerns about whether the justice system was failing to hold her accountable. This case also opened up conversations about the nature of complicity in violent crimes. While many people initially saw Karla as a victim manipulated by her husband, the evidence presented during the trial suggested a much more active role in the planning and the execution of the crimes. This led to even a broader discussion about the moral implications of complicity and whether the individual's mental state can excuse participation in horrific acts. As public opinion remained divided, the case of Karla also highlighted the complexities of rehab and the public's willingness to accept individuals who have committed violent crimes back into society. So following her release from prison, Karla attempted to reintegrate into civilian life, but public backlash was swift and unyielding. Many people were flat out unwilling to accept her presence in their communities, viewing her as a constant reminder of the crimes committed. This raises more difficult questions about forgiveness and the possibility of redemption for individuals who have been involved in extreme acts of violence. And again, it's the public playing a role here, right? They are still playing a role because even if you're angry that someone got a light sentence, their sentence isn't really over just because they get out, because the public, enough of the public, is still upset. Now, this case also prompted a re-examination of how society as a whole discusses issues of sexual violence and the responsibility of individuals that are involved in such crimes. Discussions about the importance of acknowledging the agency of all participants in violent acts, regardless of their gender. And this evolving discourse emphasizes the need for more nuanced understanding of the details surrounding crime, manipulation, and personal choice. All right, let's take a look at the arguments presented in court on this case. Prosecution's case against Karla centered on the assertion that she was not merely a victim, she was an active participant in the horrific crimes committed alongside her then-husband, Paul. They aimed to portray Karla as a significant player in the rapes and the murders, emphasizing her complicity rather than framing her as a coerced partner. Key to the prosecution's argument was the evidence presented in court, including eyewitnesses, testimonies, and disturbing videotapes that documented the couple's violent acts. These tapes provided chilling insights into Karla's involvement, revealing that she was not only present during the assaults, but also engaged in the planning and the execution of the crimes. The prosecution contended that Karla's behavior during these incidents demonstrated a clear willingness to participate in the violence. Additionally, the prosecution challenged the narrative of Karla as a victim of Paul's influence. They argued that while she may have been in an abusive relationship, her actions reflected conscious choices to engage in horrific behavior rather than passive acquiescence. This perspective sought to dismantle the prevailing sympathy toward her, emphasizing the need for accountability in light of her actions. They also highlighted the brutality of the crimes. This cannot be overlooked. contrasting the severity of the acts with Karla's relatively light plea deal of manslaughter. They argued that her sentence of 12 years was inadequate given the trauma inflicted on the victims and their families. This disparity raised broader questions about those gender dynamics in the legal system, particularly regarding how female offenders are perceived and punished compared to their male counterparts. Ultimately, the prosecution aimed to establish that Karla was an active, culpable participant in the violent crimes against these young women. Their strategy was to hold her accountable for her choices. They urged the court and the public to recognize the full extent of her involvement. Then we have the defense. They focused on portraying her as a victim of psychological manipulation rather than an active participant in the crimes. They argued that her actions were heavily influenced by Paul, whom they characterized as an abusive and controlling partner. This narrative aimed to elicit sympathy for Karla, framing her as someone coerced into compliance with Paul's violent desires. A central component of the defense's argument was Karla's psychological state. They presented evidence that suggested she struggled with mental health issues, including anxiety and depression. By framing her actions within the context of psychological distress, the defense sought to argue that Karla was not in a position to fully comprehend the moral implications of her behavior, and they claimed that her participation in the crimes was a result of fear and coercion, rather than genuine intent. Moreover, the defense highlighted Karla's cooperation with law enforcement as evidence of her remorse. They argued that her decision to testify against Paul demonstrated a willingness to take responsibility for her actions, albeit framed within the context of her being a manipulated partner. This approach was intended to suggest that Karla was attempting to seek redemption and should not be viewed as equally culpable as Paul. Throughout the trial, the defense aimed to challenge the prosecution's portrayal of Karla by invoking narratives of victimhood and psychological manipulation. They sought to underscore the complexities of abusive relationships, emphasizing that individuals can be both victims and participants of violence. This argument resonated with broader societal discussions about the dynamics of power in relationships and the challenges of defining accountability when manipulation and coercion are involved. The defense positioned Karla as a victim. They attempted to evoke compassion and understanding from the jury and the public. Their narrative aimed to highlight the psychological complexities of her situation, arguing that her actions were not driven by malice, but rather by an abusive relationship with her husband. In the end, the arguments presented in Karla's trial illuminated the intricate relationship between crime, accountability, and societal perceptions of gender. The clash of narratives highlights the ongoing challenges of defining complicity and victimhood, prompting essential discussions about how we understand and address issues of violence and justice in contemporary society. And as we conclude our exploration of Karla Homolka's case, it's time to reflect on the complexities surrounding her involvement in the horrific crimes alongside her husband. This case is a challenge. We have to grapple with difficult questions about accountability and victimhood and the pure nature of evil. Karla's story is one of chilling duality. On one hand, we see a young woman, Barbie-like, who was initially portrayed as a victim, a seemingly innocent partner, ensnared in the manipulative grasp of her husband. The media painted a picture of a troubled woman, suggesting that her actions were a result of coercion and fear. However, as more evidence emerged, including harrowing videotapes of the assaults, the narrative shifted. The prosecution's case revealed that Karla was not just a passive bystander. She actively participated in the planning and the execution of these heinous acts. So this leads us to consider, was Karla truly a victim? Or was she complicit in the atrocities committed against innocent young women? The prosecution argued that her behavior indicated a conscious choice to engage in violence, challenging the notion of her as a mere pawn in Paul's schemes. But on the other hand, the defense sought to frame her actions as those of someone overwhelmed by fear and manipulation, having issues with her own psychological state. As you reflect on these contrasting narratives, think about the implications of each perspective. How do we judge individuals who exist in the gray area between victim and perpetrator? Can we separate Karla's actions from the influence of her partner, or do we view her as equally responsible for the crimes committed? These questions compel us to examine our own biases and beliefs about morality and accountability. And so it's your turn at this point to make your choice. Can you claim guilt or innocence for Karla? Is 12 years enough here? What do you think? I invite you to try to commit to a choice. Do you see her as a calculating accomplice who deserves the full weight of the law? Or do you sympathize with her as a victim caught in an abusive relationship? Imagine being in the public back then. Do you think your opinion might have been different? Think about it. And thank you for joining me in this episode of True Crime, the Court of Public Opinion. Stay safe out there, guys. Stay curious, ask the questions. And until next time, this is Alexis Knight.